Did Britain send Hollywood gentlemen or walking disasters? Behind the perfect accents and polished manners, some Golden Age British actors made choices so arrogant, careless, or bizarre that studios never forgot them. This is not about talent. It is about scandals, bad contracts, typecasting traps, ruined reputations, and careers that should have gone higher. Tonight, we count down the names Hollywood whispered about, until one final actor proves how badly genius can destroy itself. Number 20. Nigel Bruce. He played one foolish man so well that Hollywood almost forgot he was acting. Nigel Bruce had the charm, the voice, and the old-school British dignity that Golden Age studios loved. But his biggest blessing became his trap. As Dr. Watson in the Sherlock Holmes films, Bruce turned the character into a lovable, confused, slightly ridiculous sidekick. Audiences adored him, but that affection came with a price. Instead of being remembered as a versatile British actor, he became frozen as the bumbling gentleman who existed to make Sherlock look sharper. The dumb move was not lack of talent. It was letting one comic image swallow the rest of his range. Hollywood smiled at him, used him perfectly, and then quietly locked him inside the role forever. Number 19. Michael Rennie. Michael Rennie looked like a man sent from another world. Then Hollywood treated him like he belonged nowhere else. After the day the earth stood still, his calm face, controlled voice, and mysterious British stillness made him unforgettable. But that same elegance became a cage. Studios saw him as the serious stranger, the cold gentleman, the dignified outsider who entered a room and made everyone nervous. That image had power, but it also limited him. Rennie had the presence to carry bigger emotional roles, yet Hollywood kept reaching for the same polished surface. His mistake was not fighting harder against the machine before it branded him permanently. In Golden Age Hollywood, being distinctive could make you famous. But if you were not careful, it could also make you repeat yourself until the audience stopped being surprised. Number 18. Arthur Treacher. Arthur Treacher became so perfect at playing the British servant that Hollywood almost refused to see him as anything else. With his tall frame, crisp accent, dry expression, and almost mechanical politeness, he looked like the butler every American audience expected to appear in a rich person's drawing room. And that became the trap. Treacher could be funny, sharp, and quietly scene-stealing, but studios kept reaching for the same image. The loyal valet, the polished manservant, the proper English helper standing beside louder stars. The foolish part was not that he played those roles well. He played them almost too well. Once Hollywood realized he could deliver instant class and comedy in one glance, it stopped asking for more. He became useful instead of unpredictable. His name remained recognizable, but his screen identity narrowed into a walking punchline of British manners. In Golden Age Hollywood, that was dangerous. If you made a stereotype look effortless, the studio would happily keep you there forever. Number 17. Reginald Owen. Reginald Owen had the voice, face, and timing of a man born to play respectable fools, and Hollywood took that invitation far too seriously. He was skilled, experienced, and capable of bringing humor and authority into the same room, but his screen image often leaned toward fussy officials, nervous gentlemen, comic aristocrats, and men who seemed permanently one misunderstanding away from embarrassment. That made him memorable, but not always powerful. The foolishness was how easily he became part of Hollywood's British furniture, useful, familiar, and safe. He could add flavor to a film without threatening the leading man, bring comedy without taking over the story, and represent proper England without forcing the audience to think too deeply. But that reliability also limited him. Owen had range, yet the industry often preferred him as a controlled dose of British eccentricity. He was never truly wasted, but he was boxed in. Hollywood did not destroy him. It simply made him convenient. And convenient actors rarely get remembered as dangerous ones. Number 16. C. Aubrey Smith. C. Aubrey Smith did not just play British authority. He practically became Hollywood's walking passport stamp. With his stiff posture, white mustache, and booming imperial confidence, he looked as if he had marched out of a colonial club and straight into a studio spotlight. Hollywood knew exactly what to do with him. Generals, judges, lords, officers, fathers, and every grand old gentleman who sounded like tradition itself. But that became the foolish trap. Smith made the stereotype so effortless that the industry stopped imagining him differently. He was useful, respected, and instantly recognizable, but rarely surprising. The more perfectly he performed dignity, the less room there was for weakness, danger, humor, or reinvention. In a town built on illusion, his mistake was becoming too easy to cast. Hollywood did not have to challenge him, because he had already become the symbol they wanted. Number 15. Herbert Marshall. Herbert Marshall had one of the smoothest voices in Golden Age Hollywood, but sometimes smoothness becomes a velvet cage. He carried himself with quiet class, romantic restraint, and polished British sadness, the kind that made audiences lean forward without knowing why. Even after losing a leg in World War I, he built a remarkable career through discipline, elegance, and emotional control. But Hollywood kept placing him inside safe gentleman roles: husbands, lovers, officers, dignified men with wounded eyes and perfect manners. The foolish part was how rarely that image was broken open. Marshall had the weight for darker, sharper, more dangerous characters, yet studios preferred him refined and dependable. He did not fail. He settled into respectability. And in Hollywood, that can be a silent disaster. Because once the audience knows exactly what you represent, surprise disappears, and so does the chance to become unforgettable. Number 14. Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford had the face of privilege, the accent of class, and the curse of being remembered for the rooms he entered more than the performances he gave inside them. Born in London and polished by Hollywood, he looked like the perfect society star, handsome, elegant, connected, and naturally comfortable around power. But that glamour slowly became his trap. Lawford was not just an actor, he became part of the Rat Pack world, the Kennedy Circle, and the social machinery of fame. The foolishness was that his celebrity began to outrun his craft. Hollywood loves a charming insider, but it rarely respects one forever. The more his name became linked to parties, politics, famous friends, and private drama, the harder it became to see him as a serious screen force. He had presence, timing, and opportunity, but the spotlight around him became louder than the work itself. Lawford did not lack talent. He lacked a legacy strong enough to survive the gossip. In Golden Age Hollywood, that is a dangerous bargain. Fame can make you visible, but if you are not careful, it can also make your actual career disappear. Number 13. Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff gave Hollywood one of its greatest monsters, and then spent years trying to prove there was a human being behind the makeup. As Frankenstein's creature, Karloff did something extraordinary. He took a role that could have been simple horror and filled it with pain, confusion, sadness, and wounded innocence. His heavy walk, sunken eyes, and silent suffering turned a monster into tragedy. That performance made him immortal, but immortality came with chains. Hollywood saw what audiences loved and kept pulling him back toward the strange, the frightening, and the unnatural. Monsters, mad doctors, villains, haunted faces, and men who seemed to belong in shadows. The foolishness was not accepting Frankenstein. That role made him legendary. The trap was becoming so perfect in one image that the industry stopped imagining him in ordinary human terms. Karloff had warmth, intelligence, humor, and real emotional range. But the monster followed him from role to role like a shadow he could never fully escape. He won cinematic immortality, yes, but Hollywood made sure he paid for it. His career proves a cruel truth. Sometimes your greatest role does not open every door. Sometimes it locks the most important ones. Number 12. Cedric Hardwicke. Cedric Hardwicke sounded like authority itself, which is exactly why Hollywood kept using him like expensive furniture in a very serious room. He had stage prestige, a commanding voice, and the kind of British dignity that made every scene feel more respectable the moment he appeared. Studios knew exactly where to place him. Nobles, judges, fathers, priests, scholars, officials, and powerful men who seemed born to deliver grave speeches beside fireplaces. That kind of reliability made him valuable, but it also became his quiet prison. Hardwicke was talented enough for deeper, stranger, more dangerous work, yet Hollywood often treated him less like an unpredictable actor and more like a symbol of class. The foolish part was how easily his prestige hardened into predictability.
He became respected, recognizable, and constantly useful, but not always surprising. And in Golden Age Hollywood, surprise was everything. Being dignified could get you hired again and again, but if dignity became your only weapon, audiences began to know your entire performance before you even opened your mouth. Hardwick's career was not a failure, it was something more frustrating. It was talent turned into a type, and once Hollywood types you, escape becomes almost impossible. Number 11. Basil Rathbone. Basil Rathbone did not fall into a role. He was buried alive inside one of the greatest characters ever written. Before Sherlock Holmes turned him into a permanent silhouette in a deerstalker, Rathbone was a razor-sharp performer with elegance, menace, and theatrical command. He could play villains with icy precision, aristocrats with effortless arrogance, and swordsmen with a deadly kind of grace. But Hollywood discovered that audiences loved him most when he was solving crimes beside Nigel Bruce. And once that machine started printing money, escape became almost impossible. The foolish part was not playing Holmes, that was genius. The mistake was letting the role become larger than the man. Every clue he solved made his identity narrower. Every sequel made the cage stronger. Soon, Rathbone was not simply an actor playing Sherlock Holmes. He was Sherlock Holmes in the public imagination. That is the cruelest Hollywood trap. When your greatest success becomes the reason people stop seeing everything else you can do.
Number 10. Ronald Colman. Ronald Colman was so polished that Hollywood sometimes seemed afraid to let him get dirty. He had the voice of velvet, the face of a tragic romantic hero, and the calm dignity of a man born for candlelit close-ups. In the silent era and early sound years, Colman became one of the most admired British stars in America, partly because he carried refinement without looking weak. But that perfect image slowly became a problem. Audiences changed. Hollywood changed. Rougher, stranger, more unpredictable screen personalities began to feel modern, while Colman often remained trapped in nobility, restraint, and beautifully controlled suffering. The foolishness was not in his talent. It was in how carefully his screen identity was protected. A star can become too elegant for his own survival. Colman's career still had glory, but the danger faded. He seemed less like a man taking risks and more like a monument being guarded. In Hollywood, dignity wins respect, but recklessness keeps the audience awake. Number 9. Claude Rains. Claude Rains had the voice of a king, the eyes of a villain, and the curse of being too good in the wrong corners of the screen. Hollywood trusted him with power, danger, mystery, and betrayal, but rarely handed him the full romantic spotlight he could have owned. In The Invisible Man, his voice alone became a weapon. In Casablanca, he walked away with scenes even when Humphrey Bogart stood beside him. That was the strange problem. Rains was so brilliant as the elegant manipulator, the corrupt official, the charming snake, that studios kept calling him back for the same kind of magic. The foolish part was how Hollywood, and perhaps Rains himself, allowed that supporting brilliance to become a comfortable prison. He made side roles feel like main events, but that also meant producers stopped needing to promote him as the main event. His career was respected, decorated, and unforgettable, but also slightly underused. Rains did not waste his talent. Hollywood simply learned how to borrow it without giving him the whole kingdom. Number 8. Charles Laughton. Charles Laughton was a genius who made Hollywood uncomfortable, and sometimes helped them do it. He did not look like the usual leading man. He did not move like one. He did not sell fantasy the way studios preferred. Instead, he brought sweat, fear, cruelty, tenderness, and strange emotional honesty into rooms built for glamour. That made him powerful, but it also made his career unpredictable. In The Private Life of Henry VIII, he became internationally famous, turning a historical monster into something funny, terrifying, and human. But Hollywood never seemed completely sure what to do with him after that. Was he a villain? A tragic figure? A grotesque comedian? A prestige actor? Lawton's foolishness was not weakness, it was instability, insecurity, and a reputation for being difficult in an industry that punished complications. He could dominate a scene, but he could also overwhelm the movie around him. That made him fascinating, yet risky. Hollywood likes genius when it behaves. Lawton's genius did not behave, and that is why he remained unforgettable, but never easy. Number 7. James Mason. James Mason had the voice of a seducer, the face of a rebel, and the instincts of a man who refused to make Hollywood easy money. That sounds admirable, until you realize how often it kept him one step away from the superstar crown. Mason arrived with something dangerous, intelligence that could turn charming in 1 second and poisonous in the next. He could have been packaged as a smooth British leading man, the kind studios understood immediately. Instead, he kept choosing roles that were darker, colder, stranger, or morally complicated. In one film, he could seem romantic. In the next, he looked like he was judging the whole industry from across the room. That made him fascinating, but it also made him hard to sell as a simple hero. Hollywood loves talent, but it loves clear branding even more. Mason's dumb move was not chasing cheap fame. It was almost the opposite. He resisted the obvious path so strongly that the machine never fully knew where to place him. He became respected, admired, and unforgettable. But there was always a sense that he could have been even bigger if he had played the game more shamelessly. Some actors lose because they lack depth. Mason sometimes lost because he had too much of it. That is a stylish mistake, but still a costly one. Number 6. Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier walked into Hollywood like a monument, then sometimes acted as if the monument could never crack. He was not just another British actor trying to survive in America. He was the stage lion, the Shakespearean master, the man who could turn dialogue into thunder. When Hollywood used him properly, the result could be electric, grand, romantic, tortured, and larger than life. But that greatness came with a dangerous shadow. Olivier's reputation was so enormous that every role carried the weight of expectation. He was expected to be brilliant before he even opened his mouth. And when a legendary actor starts choosing projects beneath his stature, the fall feels sharper because the audience knows what he is capable of. His foolishness was not a lack of craft, it was prestige miscalculation. At times, Hollywood seemed to borrow his name more than unleash his power. He could appear too formal for a changing screen culture, too theatrical when audiences wanted something raw, too important to disappear naturally into a role. That is the strange curse of being called the greatest. You stop being judged like an actor and start being judged like an institution. Olivier survived that pressure better than most, but some choices made him look trapped by his own legend. Hollywood did not destroy him. His own greatness made every wrong turn louder.
Number 5. Stuart Granger. Stuart Granger looked like he had been built in a studio laboratory for adventure films. Handsome, arrogant, dangerous, and perfectly tailored for Technicolor glory. Hollywood wanted him as the British answer to the swashbuckling hero, a man who could wear a sword, ride a horse, insult a villain, kiss the heroine, and still look like he had just stepped out of a royal portrait. And for a while, it worked beautifully. Granger had presence. He had confidence. He had the kind of screen arrogance that could turn a simple adventure scene into a contest of male pride. But that confidence also became the crack in the marble. He often seemed too aware of his own star power, and Hollywood does not always forgive an actor who acts like the kingdom already belongs to him. Contract battles, ego clashes, and uneven role choices slowly weakened the momentum that should have made him untouchable. The foolish part was not ambition. Every star needs ambition. The mistake was behaving as if charm alone could keep the machine loyal. Hollywood used him when adventure films were hot, but when tastes shifted, the industry did not fight very hard to protect him. He had the look of a legend, but not always the strategy of one. Granger's career is a classic golden age warning. Being handsome, talented, and confident can open the palace gates. But if you start believing the throne is guaranteed, Hollywood quietly changes the locks. Number 4. David Niven. David Niven was so charming that his biggest mistake was making everything look too easy. He had the perfect British cocktail: wit, elegance, military polish, a mischievous smile, and the relaxed confidence of a man who could survive any dinner party scandal with one brilliant line. Audiences loved him because he seemed civilized without being boring, naughty without being crude, and sophisticated without trying too hard. But that effortless image carried a hidden cost. Hollywood often treated Niven as a delightful personality before it treated him as a dangerous actor. He could do drama, he could do pain, he could do quiet heartbreak behind that polished smile. Yet too often, The industry leaned on the surface: the playboy, the gentleman, the charming husband, the elegant rogue. The foolishness was not that Niven lacked depth, it was that he sometimes allowed the sparkle to hide the steel. In a town where image becomes currency, his charm paid well, but it also limited how seriously some people saw him. Even when he won respect, the public often remembered the persona first: the polished British man with the raised eyebrow and perfect timing. That is not a failure, but it is a trap wrapped in velvet. Niven's career remained beloved, but it also proved something uncomfortable. Sometimes Hollywood does not punish you for being bad. Sometimes it punishes you for being so pleasant that nobody remembers how much more you could have done.
Number 3. Robert Newton. Robert Newton did not just play pirates. He accidentally taught the world how pirates were supposed to sound, then let real life become almost as chaotic as the characters he played. With his wild eyes, rolling voice, and explosive physical energy, Newton had the kind of screen presence directors could not fake. When he appeared as Long John Silver in Treasure Island, he turned the role into something bigger than a performance. His exaggerated West Country accent became the blueprint for the pirate voice audiences still recognize today. That is power. That is legacy. But it is also where the tragedy begins. Newton had talent strong enough to make him unforgettable, yet his career was constantly threatened by instability, hard living, and a reputation that made studios nervous. Hollywood loves wild men on screen, but behind the camera, it wants them punctual, sober, obedient, and profitable. Newton's foolish mistake was letting the chaos spill beyond the performance. The same rough energy that made him magnetic also made him risky. He could steal a scene with one laugh, one glare, one drunken roar of menace. But the industry could not always trust him with bigger, more controlled opportunities. Instead of becoming a long-lasting British character legend with endless prestige roles, he became attached to one giant image: the dangerous, loud, unpredictable rogue. And that image, while iconic, also swallowed much of his range. Newton's story feels like Golden Age Hollywood at its most cruel. It rewarded his madness, sold his madness, then punished him for living too close to it. He was not dumb because he lacked brilliance. He was on this list because brilliance without control can become a trap. And Newton walked straight into it with a bottle in one hand and a legend in the other.
Number 2. Rex Harrison.
Rex Harrison had the voice of a prince, the manners of a lord, and the public reputation of a man who could turn charm into wreckage. On screen, he seemed effortless, cool, witty, arrogant, and dangerously controlled. He was not the kind of actor who begged for attention. He walked into a scene as if attention already belonged to him. That confidence helped make him magnetic, but it also fed the very image that made Hollywood nervous. Harrison could be brilliant, but he often appeared impossible to warm to. His characters had sharp tongues, polished cruelty, and a superior little smile that made audiences wonder whether the actor and the role were separated by much at all. Then came the off-screen controversies, especially the tragic Carol Landis scandal, which attached a darker shadow to his name. Hollywood could forgive many things, but it never forgot a scandal that made a star look cold, selfish, or careless. Harrison's dumb mistake was letting the public see too much of the arrogance that his performances had made famous. He had rare talent, but talent alone does not protect a reputation. Once the audience starts believing the villainy is not acting, every performance carries extra baggage. He still survived, still worked, still became legendary in his own way, but his image was never innocent. Rex Harrison is this high on the list because he represents one of Hollywood's oldest warnings. Charm can open every door, but arrogance can make people quietly enjoy watching those doors close.
Number 1. George Sanders.
George Sanders was not destroyed because he was foolish. He was destroyed because he was too clever, too cynical, and too willing to turn his own life into a sneer. Hollywood loved him as the elegant cad, the bored gentleman, the silky villain, the man who could insult you so beautifully you almost thanked him. In All About Eve, he turned poisonous wit into art and won an Oscar for it. But that victory also sharpened the trap. Sanders became the man audiences expected to be cruel, superior, amused, and emotionally untouchable. The foolishness was that he seemed to believe the mask too deeply. Instead of fighting to escape the image, he leaned into it until the line between performance and personality became dangerously thin. His voice sounded like old money laughing at human weakness. His face carried the tired amusement of someone who had already decided the world was disappointing. That made him unforgettable on screen, but it made his life feel haunted off-screen. Failed relationships, career decline, restlessness, and a growing bitterness turned his sophistication into something sadder. By the end, the famous cynic seemed trapped inside the very boredom he had performed so perfectly. His death by overdose, along with the often-quoted suicide note about being bored, made his final act feel like a terrible extension of his screen persona. That is why George Sanders belongs at number one. He was brilliant, polished, and dangerous, but his dumbest mistake was treating life itself like one more role he could exit with style. Hollywood gave him the perfect villain mask, and tragically, he never fully took it off. So were they really the dumbest British actors in Golden Age Hollywood? Or were they brilliant men who made the most foolish moves in a ruthless town? Some were trapped by one role, some by ego, some by scandal, and some by the very charm that made them famous. Hollywood gave them applause, but it also remembered every mistake. And that is the cruel lesson. Talent can make you a star, but one wrong image can turn you into a warning.